Everyone has something that is unacceptable within them. I certainly do, and I'd wager you do as well. I wonder which is best, Professor. To cut away that which is unacceptable, or to find a way to accept it anyway?
The Boar Prince, Dimitri, is consistently plagued by a struggle to accept his paradoxical personality, and this internal conflict is the root of his character. Dimitri's two personalities represent different views on justice, and Dimitri has great difficulty reconciling the two. Dimitri seems destined to succeed while he's attending Garreg Mach, yet after the time skip, he completely falls apart and becomes a beast, beholden to avenge the weak. What are the causes of his internal struggle? How did Dimitri come to accept his two radically different personalities? And what drove him to grow beyond his destructive outlook to become the Savior King?
Part 1. White Clouds. Great Tree Moon.
When you first encounter Dimitri, you'll immediately notice that he is very polite, kind, and conscientious. This first impression will be reinforced when you are investigating the Blue Lions, when deciding which house to teach at the beginning of the game. When asked about all of his classmates, Dimitri gives glowing descriptions of them, always seeking to portray them in the best light because he thinks so highly of them. However, when asked about himself, he can't say a single positive thing, and actually only mentions the tragedy that had defined his life up until that point. Dimitri describes himself in such a negative way because he feels that the tragedy of Duscur is a highly defining part of his life, and his negativity is rooted in his failure to live up to his own moral convictions. Dimitri's morality is a driving force of his character, as he cares deeply for all people, and for justice in the form of protecting the people from abuses of the strong. You can see Dimitri's dedication to protecting the lives of the innocent in his conversation with Byleth after putting down Lord Lonato's rebellion. Ash is questioning his behavior and believes his actions to have been wrong, yet Dimitri nonetheless reassures Ash that everyone fighting for the church did what had to be done. After Ash leaves the scene, Dimitri begins to reflect on his own participation, noting that he had killed those that he has sworn to protect. Byleth then reassures Dimitri, just as Dimitri reassured Ash a few seconds ago, but Dimitri is having none of it, and he immediately responds,
"Are you insane? Those weren't knights or soldiers, but fathers and sons! We shouldn't have killed them! We should have found another way!"
Dimitri doesn't hold Ash to the same standard that he holds himself to, because he can reasonably understand that it's better to comfort Ash than to share in his doubts, being the leader of the Blue Lions. But he holds himself accountable for those killed because he should have done better, because as the leader, he shouldn't hide behind the banner of a just cause to take any life as you please. He believes in a world where the causes of people can be understood and addressed, and while he's aware of the ideal nature of it, he must come to see it pass, so that such tragic loss can no longer happen due to leaders and their supposed just causes. After White Clouds, Dimitri has a significant shift in character, where he becomes far more vengeful and violent due to the war and a worsened mental state.
Part 2. Azure Moon. Ethereal Moon.
When you first encounter Dimitri post-time skip, he is more similar to the bloodthirsty boar that Felix describes than the caring young man that we knew for almost the entirety of White Clouds. Dimitri has now entirely embraced his destructive and violent approach to justice, although he hadn't accepted it as a valid part of himself, but had used it as a way to enact justice in Fodlan during the Empire's War. Dimitri's destructive behavior is still fundamentally rooted in his desire to be a defender of the weak and an enforcer of justice for a world that has none. One can see Dimitri's self-imposed morality when he coldly declares in the time skip that,
"I told you, I will kill them all." They must die. Someone must put a stop to this cycle of the strong trampling the weak. Or do you condone their actions? Do you believe that the pillaging and slaughtering those rats live for is justified? It is reprehensible and they must be put down. I intend to give them a taste of the pain they have inflicted on others. Even if it means becoming a rat myself, I swore to at least do that much. I will not let them down.
Dimitri's morality is best expressed during battles post-time skip, where the player now sees Dimitri's violence and justice in action. When he kills any enemy soldier, he'll say new quotes that show his morality in action, such as,
Too weak for this world. See you in the eternal flame. I disposed of doubt long ago.
all of his quotes conveying that he won't hesitate to judge and punish who he sees as the wicked, and that they and him are both deserving of eternal punishment. When he dies, he reinforces his self-hatred in declaring that his death was
a fitting end for a monster like me.
Dimitri's guilt comes from his slaughtering of bandits and soldiers during the war that he feels is unacceptable, even though they are often incidental casualties that occur as a result of the war-torn nature of Fodlan. When he meets Rodrigue at Alo, Gilbert describes the Fodlan myth of Alo. Despite the idea of eternal flames, Fodlan's faithful believe that the flames of atonement will burn away their sins and will absolve them of their sins. Dimitri is not satisfied with forgiveness, believing that he must fulfill his duties to the dead and face the burden of his sins until the day he dies. There is no atonement in Dimitri's view. Dimitri's destructive nature post-timeskip also carries over to destroying the ideologies of his opponents who he views as hypocrites because they kill in the name of ideals that Dimitri views as cliché and unjustified. Randolph declares that Dimitri must have been the demon who was slaughtering Imperial troops. Dimitri responds by asking how that matters to Randolph. Randolph then angrily rebuts by accusing Dimitri of having no regard for life, yet that was the exact point that Dimitri was getting at in asking what it mattered to Randolph, as an Imperial general perpetuating a bloody war, killing thousands with the orders that he gave. Dimitri also calls out Gwendel's flawed form of honor when Gwendel would lead an attack against the Kingdom Army against his better judgment because he had to retain loyalty to House Rowe. Dimitri calls him nothing more than a dog that follows his traitorous master's orders. Finally, when Dimitri confronts Edelgard at Gronder Field, he threatens her life and she responds that she won't be dying then calling out her headstrong view of the world as bending to her will by screaming that,
I'm sure all of the people you've slaughtered so far thought the same!
It's time to die!
Dimitri! Rodrigue!
After Rodrigue's death at the Battle of Gronder, Dimitri explains the reasoning behind his dark path. Dimitri clarifies that he must do what he's doing to fulfill the wills of the dead, since they've passed on and have no ability to see through their wills themselves. Dimitri's views on the dead are rooted in his belief that everyone has the right to live life as they see fit, and as a result, he detests when the strong impose their way of life on others through force. His hatred for Edelgard was not just the result of him misunderstanding her role in the tragedy of Duscur, but was also the result of her willingness to trample upon the weak to bring about her brighter future. Edelgard's belief system is entirely contradictory to Dimitri's. Dimitri falters in his belief in fulfilling the wills of the dead, and begins to understand that he can't reach the dead.
How do I silence their desperate pleas? How do I save them? Ever since that day 9 years ago, I have lived only to avenge the fallen. Even my time at the Officers' Academy was also that I could secure my revenge and clear away the regret of the dead. It was the only thing that kept me alive, my only reason to keep moving forward. But then who or what should I live for? What I believe in. Rodrigue said the same thing. But is it possible? I am a murderous monster. My hands are stained red.
Could one such as I truly hope for such a life? As the sole survivor of that day, do I have the right to live for myself?
Dimitri realizes that Rodrigue, in his passing, only wanted Dimitri to choose to live for his beliefs, and this pushes Dimitri onto a more positive and creative path that seeks to fulfill the wills of the living and create a more merciful and understanding world to see Dimitri's dream through. Dimitri then returns to the War Council and declares that he will retake Verdiad, not because he must, but because he chooses to. When Dimitri retakes Verdiad, he's shocked to see that his people are celebrating his return, and he's touched by the fact that even his citizens could forgive all he had done after he had neglected them for so long. After Dimitri and the professor had retaken the city, Dimitri thanks the professor for teaching him the most important thing: how to live life. Even in his dark state before Rodrigue's death, Byleth only sought to empower Dimitri, leading him to accept himself and realize how to follow his own path. Dimitri learned to truly live for himself, a concept that he couldn't understand until Byleth had recontextualized Rodrigue's death to truly let Dimitri know that he is no longer beholden by the wills of the dead. The relationship between Dimitri and Edelgard is one of the defining themes within the game. While Edelgard is admirable in her will and her intentions, Dimitri serves as a foil to Edelgard, and I think when he is in his right mind, he completely deconstructs her worldview. In Enbar, Dimitri meets with Edelgard, and they directly hash out their differences in their worldviews that are fundamentally found to be irreconcilable. Dimitri accuses Edelgard of not only being unable to stop the cycle of the strong dominating the weak, but also being an enforcer of such a system.
But you cannot force that belief onto others. People aren't as strong as you think they are. There are those who cannot live without their faith, and those who cannot go on once they have lost their reason for living. Your path will not be able to save them. It is the path of the strong, and so it could only benefit the strong.
Both Dimitri and Edelgard continue to talk until Dimitri realizes there's no way they'll ever agree. Dimitri then decides to re-gift Edelgard the dagger that he had given to her years ago when they were children. But we'll get more into that later because it plays a huge aspect into Dimitri's characterization and his supports. After Dimitri finishes speaking with Edelgard, he and the Kingdom Army invade Enbar and storm the Imperial Palace, and Dimitri takes on the monstrous hegemon Edelgard. After Edelgard is defeated, Dimitri attempts to reach out his hand as an open invitation towards a brighter future that both Dimitri and Edelgard can reach by walking a path together, because part of Dimitri's dream is to let everyone see their dreams realized. But Edelgard forces Dimitri to end her life because for all of her flaws, she does know that their ideals can never coexist. She gives him back the dagger, once again symbolically telling him to cut a path to his own future. After killing Edelgard, Dimitri looks back into the dimly lit throne room and appears to almost become consumed by her voice, blaming him for her death. But Byleth takes his hand and leads Dimitri towards a greater future for the strong and weak alike. In Dimitri's ending, he proceeds to overhaul the government of the new unified kingdom of Fargus, to allow for representation from the people, to create a system where the common man of Fodlan can express himself without the need for a new conflict of the strong trampling the weak. Dimitri is afflicted with mental illness even after overcoming his hateful mindset through the course of the story. In Dimitri's support with Byleth, it's revealed that he continues to hear the voices that have tormented him, and he will hear them up until the day he dies. Even though Dimitri overcame his grief and anger, he will still be tortured with those voices for the rest of his life. Byleth leads Dimitri to look towards the future, instead of being stuck in the past, beholden by the tragedies and deaths that he can never wholly restore. Through Byleth, Dimitri finds that he can make the cruel deaths of war finally mean something, to create a better world that can stop the weak from constantly being unjustly abused by the strong. Dimitri's supports with Byleth are small-scale parallels of Dimitri's personal journey throughout the Blue Lions campaign and his relationship with Edelgard. Eventually, through better understanding himself, he learns to direct his energy towards things that he chooses to do. Dimitri's supports are an exploration of the primary idea behind Dimitri's character. How would someone with both constructive and destructive forms of justice within their personality reconcile those contradictions, and whether or not they should? Dimitri's C support shows him to be compassionate towards a group of young children by teaching them swordsmanship. He then reveals how he wants to be a beacon of hope for those in need of help, just like Rodrigue, his father figure. This is a representation of creative and restorative justice. Then moving into Dimitri and Byleth's B support, Dimitri asks Byleth whether he can easily kill people or not. In responding that it's not easy, Dimitri feels more at ease to reveal to Byleth that he himself grapples with the nature of war and violence. During the Kingdom Rebellion, Dimitri both realized that those fighting on the other side were people with genuine goodwill and hopes and dreams, but he also realized a darker side to himself. Dimitri realized that he thoroughly enjoyed punishing those who wronged him, and that in quelling the rebellion, Dimitri slaughtered the rebels and enjoyed it, according to Felix. Dimitri himself understands this contradiction between his two conceptions of justice, and at this point, he fundamentally rejects one as unacceptable, and the other as ideal. Byleth and Dimitri's A support muddies the water in Dimitri's ideas of justice. His A support is only available after he chooses to accept himself within the main story, because it's necessary for Dimitri to have gone through that process of acceptance before he can come to the realization he has within the support. Dimitri tells Byleth that the youths they taught swordsmanship to in their C support had begun terrorizing the local population with their sword skills that they had learned from Dimitri. Dimitri realizes that the seemingly constructive and beneficial act turned into one of destruction that would harm the common people residing around Garrick Mach. Dimitri also reflects on his experience chasing his punitive justice as being too destructive and hateful, and he comes to realize that he can channel that destructive energy of his violent side into greater things, specifically to create a better world where unfortunate events such as the children becoming bandits wouldn't happen anymore. The most important aspect to Dimitri accepting himself is for him to understand that his destructive strength has a place in the world, and that restorative acts of just kindness sometimes aren't the answer. And in the case of the war, the only answer is for Dimitri to create a greater world in line with his just beliefs through the destruction of Edelgard's dream, that in practice is all too similar to the actions of many rulers before her. To tie Dimitri's supports into his relationship with Edelgard, Dimitri giving Edelgard the dagger as a sign to cut a path to a better future would have a lasting effect on her, giving her the strength and spirit to persist through her trauma as a child, and to begin her war of liberation as she sees it. In empowering Edelgard, Dimitri inadvertently gave her the strength to see through her violent goals. This is the same as when he had taught the youths swordsmanship in his C support with Byleth, and they used it for evil purposes in their A support. In the A support, Dimitri reflects on the failings of his empowerment of the youths, and finds that it wasn't necessarily a good thing, even though it was done with the best of intentions, similarly to how his helping Edelgard backfired for him as well. In his reflection, he realized that his violent side has a purpose, in stopping the youths who had become bandits, and subsequently stopping Edelgard and ending her war once and for all. It's clear to see that Dimitri is a very conscientious character that would continually have his earnest expectations of the world subverted by cruelty, and he would let this cruelty in turn consume him, leading him to adopt the very same cruelty that had tormented him all his life, to punish the cruel. Dimitri's redemption is an example of how sometimes we all must look beyond the seemingly meaningless suffering of the world and look to make that suffering mean something. I think Dimitri's dream is a little naive, but it's something worth striving for. A future where all can live to fulfill their dreams without being kept down by others. Dimitri's character can also serve as an example of how anyone is worthy of redemption, and that you can work to move beyond your trauma and burdens to be the best version of yourself that you can be through acceptance. Hey, thanks for watching my video on Dimitri. This is my first time ever trying anything like this, so let me know what you thought, and I'll do my best to improve it in the future if I do anything more like this. And if you do want to see more like this, I have a lot of ideas on Three Houses and even Dimitri. so I'll make more videos if there's a demand for them.